So this one's on legs. So one of the big things that we really joke around with people about is don't skip leg day. So you see a lot of people who go into the gym, work their upper body, even work core, don't really work their legs. Leg day really isn't fun. It's sometimes difficult to walk the next day or two, but leg day is very important. So one of the big things, your leg musculature accounts for over 50% of your muscle mass total body. So if you're not working legs, you're missing out on a lot of muscle, which from previous talks, muscle equals metabolism. So that means that's half of your metabolic rate that you're not working on. The other big thing is that muscle mass contributes to your balance, your ability to stand, walk, run, drive, jump. It also impacts, avoiding a fall, the strength of your hips, the strength of your knees, the strength of your ankles. So while leg day isn't always fun, that musculature, you could argue in a number of respects, is even more important than the upper body musculature. So you're going to rely on these muscles every day for so many things. You have to work your legs. And we're going to go over the muscles involved, the balance between the muscles. Then I want to go through specific exercises. We're going to start a little bit easier, and then we're going to kind of scale them up a little bit and hopefully literally talk you through some of them, things that you should look for. So one of the big things with legs is most people do not focus on their hamstrings nearly as much. So yes, this shows glutes. Your hamstrings are actually 5 separate muscles. Now, your hamstrings are actually meant to be stronger than your quads. So your hamstrings start at your pelvis and actually cross the back of your knee. So depending upon the movement, you're going to use these muscles for standing, sitting, walking, moving side to side, moving front to back. You use these muscles every day, but most people fail to really work that musculature at least as much as it needs to be worked. So those 5 muscles should be stronger than your quads. Everybody focuses on their quads, the 4 muscles in the front. No, your hamstrings are meant to be stronger. So a lot of times we see problems with muscle imbalances. People work the front of their legs, don't balance it out with working the back of their legs or their hamstrings. So running, jumping, standing. The other important part to your hamstrings, because they cross the back of your knees, this actually supports and keeps the back of your knees strong. So we call it the posterior chain. Your lower back, your glutes, and your hamstrings. They're all tied together. If one is weak, the other ones are weak also. So when you work your hamstrings, you're going to work your glutes, you're going to work your lower back, and vice versa. So those bridge exercises I had you doing starting from the very beginning, those are a lower back exercise, but they also work your glutes and they work your hamstrings. They all tie in together. So when we look at big exercises, a deadlift is the strongest movement, not squats. So you have people, I can squat 200-300 pounds, but then they cannot deadlift the same amount. That shows to me a big muscle imbalance. And if you're overworking your quads, the front of the legs, it pulls on your knees and can actually adversely affect your knees and stability of your knees. So hamstrings are important. We're going to go into what exercises specifically for this. Quads. So quad is 4 specific muscles, front of the leg. This also crosses the knee, so your quads straighten out your knee. They help straighten out the pelvis. Your quads and the strength of those muscles tie into the strength of your patellar tendon, the strength of your medial and lateral meniscus, the strength of your ACL. So quads are very important. You need these, and they need to be strong to be able to lock out the knee correctly and stabilize the knee joint. But your hamstrings need to be stronger. So quads do literally almost all the same movements as your hamstrings. Your body doesn't work just one or just the other. Forward and backward movement, standing up, sitting down. Your body works quads and hamstrings both. It's not going to isolate just one or just the other. It uses both to get the job done. This supports the front of the knee. So you need quads, and you get quads a lot. Usually have you ever been in somebody's sofa that was really low and you played heck getting up out of the darn thing? That is quads primarily. That straightens the knee. So quads are important. Once you get up high enough, then your body can engage the hamstrings to straighten out the hips to help you get up. Initially, it's all quads. So both play a role. Now, your calves control movement of the ankles and balance. They also help curl your toes up and lift your foot. So calves, when we say calves, it's not just in the back of the leg, it's also the muscles along the sides and in front. So calf raises are great. Also toe raises, picking the feet up. A lot of times we have people, one of the big reasons why people trip and fall, especially on rugs, they don't pick their feet or lift their feet up enough when they walk. Or they have what we call foot drop, meaning their foot literally drops down as they take a step. They don't have the strength in the lower legs to keep that foot up or even elevate it a little bit as they step. So that foot drop literally causes you to drag that foot across the ground. Anything in its way, you're likely to trip over. They also help bend the knees. And here's one of the most interesting parts. Your calf muscles help pump blood up from the lower legs. So it's not just your heart working, it's the pump of the calf muscles that actually helps push the blood back up towards the heart. So people that have edema, meaning swelling in the legs, a lot of that can be helped by working the calf muscles. That will actually help push some of that fluid and blood back up from the ankles and the legs towards the heart. So your calves play a very important role, and they stabilize your ankles. So if people tend to roll their ankles a lot, we actually have them do a lot of calf work. So this plays a big role in your balance. So then this gets into what should you be doing? So you're going to see some of these exercises. We've talked about some of these. They're on your program. I've added more, and we're going to go through them. So squats are a great exercise, and you should be doing squats. So you notice squats off a chair. Great exercise. This is usually how I teach people to do squats, is starting with a chair. The big reason is this is going to get your form down correctly even when you go away from the chair. So you notice her hips move backwards towards the chair. That's the way all squat movements start. A lot of people like to bend their knees first. No, your butt moves backwards first. If you focus on your butt moving backwards, your knees will not go past the end of your toes. it actually takes a lot of load off of your knees. So making sure that people start with a chair or a bench behind them is very important for form. Usually after that, if they have what we call a physio ball, the one at the bottom, we'll have people start with a physio ball on the wall. You don't have to worry about balance as much. You're just focused on going down and back up. The last one is what we would call a body weight squat, nothing behind you. Now, one quick thing I want you to notice about all of these. You notice the lowest that they go is hips just below the knees. You do not need to go any lower than that. One of the big things, you should have the mobility to drop a little bit lower. Once we start adding weight, you never go lower than that. This is where a lot of people get hurt, is you'll hear a term basically stating your butt needs to go towards the ground. Your butt needs to almost touch the ground. That is far too low. If you're going that low with a squat, all the load is going to your lower back. So we have, has everybody heard the term bro science? No, okay. So this is a lovely term that basically means it's science used by people in the gym that really have no background in knowing what they're doing. It's your brother in the gym, your buddy, basically is giving you advice on how to do things the right way, but he doesn't know the right way either. So bro science basically is, yeah, go as low as you can, butt to the ground. So a wonderful bro science term is called a butt wink. And yes, very scientific sounding. Literally, if you watch somebody from the back who's going too low, meaning as soon as their hips start going lower than their knees, you'll literally see their belt line curve down. So if they have a belt on, you'll see that belt dip down back behind. That is their lower back stretching out under the weight and load of their body and any extra weight they're holding. That's how people hurt themselves squatting. They add weight and go too low. So in all of these, we don't have people going lower than basically hips at knee level, maybe just a titch below. That's it. On a chair, we don't have you going that low. The lady who's doing body weight, she's not going that low. About 90 degrees at the knees, that's it. So when you're doing these at home, form is everything. If you go too low, you're going to feel it in your lower back. This is a leg exercise. If you're feeling it in your lower back, you're doing it wrong. So we have a saying, you do not add weight to dysfunction. If you're not doing it right, you don't add weight to the exercise. So form first. Don't go too low with squats. The other thing is, if you go over to somebody's house and they have a really low couch, don't sit in it. Opt for a chair. A chair is not going to be as low. It's going to be a lot easier to get out of later. Otherwise, you go with something too low, it requires a lot more strength to get up and out of that low seat, because mechanically you're at a disadvantage as soon as your hips go far lower than your knees. Any questions on squats? I think you're still muted, Dave.
In the third example there, the dead weight.
Yes.
She doesn't look like she even gets close to having her hips below her knees.
No, she could probably go a little bit lower, but here's the catch. how low you go really depends on the individual. So now we're getting into how much hip mobility do you have? If you run typically tight, if you don't have a lot of hip mobility, no, don't go that low. Because as soon as you do, all the weight and load is going to be on your lower back. So it's more the limitation of the individual. I have some people that I start out at half range of motion, meaning they'll only go half that distance or half as low as that. They won't even come close to that for weeks. When they get stronger and more mobile, then they can go lower. That's also a good reason for starting with a chair behind you. A lot of people, once they go too low, they're done. They're going to fall. So if they don't have the strength, I start people on a chair. You've got a backstop, you know not to go too low, and it's a lot safer way to begin the exercise. Then progress to come down, just barely touch your butt or the back of your thighs to the chair and come back up before ever going to body weight only. The other part to this, you notice everybody's got their feet a little bit different width apart.
Right.
Basically, it is your comfort level. There is no one right answer. We tell people about shoulder or hip width apart. It depends on the person. Can you be wider? Yes. Can you be narrower? Yes. Height does not always play a role. I've got one guy that's about 5'5", and he goes super wide on his feet. It's more comfortable on his hips. I've got one guy that's 6'2", and his feet are 6 or 7 inches apart. You look at it, it looks way too narrow. It's more comfortable on his hips. So the right answer is, which way does it feel the best for you? Which way can you get proper range of motion without pain, without feeling it in your back? That's what's right for you. So you may have to play around with how wide your feet are to figure that out for you.
Right. 2 other quick questions.
Sure,
These
please.
are in graduated degrees of difficulty. Number 2 just looked much easier than either one of the other 2. Maybe I would be doing it wrong.
Number 2, it is to a point. You're going to have a little bit less body weight on that one compared to the first one. But if you don't have a ball behind you, I would start with the squats basically off a chair. You stand up and sit down every day. So technically you're doing a squat. So you can do that. The wall one is great for challenging you a little differently, but you don't have to go to that progression. You could go from the first one to the third one as long as you can perform the exercise correctly and safely.
Thanks, Dale. The last question is, I had ACLs done on both knees about 35 years ago. Is there any problem that I should look at in doing these?
The only big thing there is make sure you start with pushing the hips backwards. If you bend the knees first, your knees automatically push forward and go over the toes. That will be a lot more load on your knees. You'll feel that. If you're focused on pushing the hips backwards to sit your butt on a chair, you should not feel those knees.
Great.
So ACL repairs, no, we see great luck with them. Usually we see a little bit better luck if they used your own tendon versus a cadaver tendon, but that's usually more in the sports realm than just day-to-day wear and tear. Any other questions on squats? Okay. So next exercise is leg extension. Now, a couple things here. This is one that I put into your program because this specifically works your quads and it will help strengthen across the knees. Now, you'll hear good and bad about leg extensions. In rehab and physical therapy, we use leg extensions a lot. Leg extensions can be a great exercise, but in all three cases, it's not much weight. You notice even the lady on the machine is using the smallest plate. She doesn't have a lot of weight stacked on there. We don't go heavy with leg extension machines. Bodybuilders go heavy with leg extension machines. The rest of us no. So it puts a lot of load. It concentrates it across the knee. That's good and bad. It's good because we can really focus on strengthening the muscles and the tendons and ligaments around that knee without a lot of weight, like in the first one. Single leg, focusing on getting that leg all the way straight, locking out the knee. You're not jerking it. Full range of motion, lock the knee, unlock the knee, hinge at the knee, back down again. The second one is just using a little bit of resistance. The third one on machines, machines are not inherently bad. There's a couple catches with all machines. First of all, they only fit about 70% of the population. That's one of the big things a lot of people don't realize. The second part is you have to adjust the machine to fit you. On this machine, you'll see there's a hinge point on the machine. You have to adjust the seat forward or backwards so the middle of your knee lines up with that pivot point or that hinge on the machine. If you do not, if that machine is not adjusted right for you, it's a lot of extra wear and load on your knees. Second thing is, when I have people use leg extension machines, it's the last exercise, it's single leg, and they can only use the lightest weight on there. I don't want them going up in weight much. This is used to just finish working the quads, the tendons and ligaments. This is not a primary strength building exercise. So it's a great exercise, but it's not a big muscle building exercise. It strengthens the muscles a little bit, but more focuses on the tendons and ligaments around the knee. Questions?
Okay. I was going to try and keep quiet.
I want questions because this gives me a chance to explain things or address any specific issues or things you've heard.
I like the first one there where the lady has got her foot straight out or her leg straight out like that. But I think that on the exercises that you gave us, we were also to bend forward and get, try to get within 6 or 8 inches of it. At least that was the test, I think, that you were.
Okay, so.
And that hurt my back.
The test was flexibility. The exercises we're doing these for repetitions to build a little bit of strength around the knee. So 2 separate things.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I like that. That doesn't.
So first rule, if it hurts, stop doing it.
I did.
So just this without bending forward is going to work the quads and help strengthen around that knee. So especially for a prior ACL surgery, this is a good one to keep around that knee strong without weight. So even if you're using no weight at all, I would put this towards the end, do your squats and bigger exercises first, use this one towards the end to help strengthen a little bit more around it.
Thank you.
Any other questions on leg extensions? Okay, moving on. So leg curls. This is a great one because this is going to focus on your hamstrings. So the top one, we did lying leg curls. This is, you notice she has a dumbbell between her feet to add a little bit of resistance or weight to it. So this is a great way you can work that exercise up. Now, the leg curl where you see the gentleman on his heels, this is kind of an interesting one because it's actually using furniture movers. So as sliders to slide along. So if you do that, number one, go to the hardware store and buy furniture movers. They're cheap. You see a number of companies have taken the cheap furniture movers, put their own logo on it, and then doubled the price. They're the same as the ones you're going to get at Ace Hardware or the hardware stores, just you're not paying for somebody's logo on them. So they make a different one, whether it's on carpet or hardwood floors. Obviously, get the right one for your home. But this is going to be more load on your hamstrings. The first time you do this, you will feel it a lot. Go easy. So it's going to work those hamstrings. It's really going to work across the back of your knees. Start with both legs at the same time. Don't start single leg only. It'll be too much load. Then we have a hamstring curl machine. You can go heavier on this, but same rule, you have to adjust the machine for you. You have to make sure your knee is lined up with the pivot point of the machine. So for some people taller or shorter, you can't get it to adjust to you. Don't use it. You're going to cause a lot of extra wear on your knee joint if you cannot get the machine to adjust to you. Questions?
Okay. The second one, is that the bridge?
So it's a form of bridge. The big difference is usually when we do a bridge, we start with the knees bent and pick the butt up off the ground.
Right.
This one, you're actually pulling with the hamstrings, pulling the legs into you to bridge up. This is going to work hamstrings more, lower back less. So same exercise, but how you perform it is going to change which muscles carry most of the load. So that's why I said I could take that exercise or exercise program and manipulate things and use that exercise program for 6 months to a year with somebody, because little things like how we perform the exercise changes the whole exercise. It's still going to work lower back, glutes a little bit, but most of the load is going to be on your hamstrings. And trust me, it's going to be how hard you dig those heels into the ground is going to change how much you feel those hamstrings. The first couple times, first 2 or 3 weeks of doing this, do not dig those hamstrings into the ground too hard. You will feel them really lock up. You'll get a Charlie horse like you do not remember since childhood.
Is this the same one that you had mentioned before? The next step up with it would be to go ahead and place a small weight on your stomach?
No, so this is actually even different than that. This is a variation that is meant specifically to work hamstrings. The variation where you place a small weight on your stomach is still geared mostly to work your lower back and then your glutes.
Okay.
So that's one of the nice things about exercises is you can take the same exercise, change it up a couple different ways, and work multiple areas. So for instance, if you were laying on the ground and you had a dumbbell placed on your stomach, you could do bridges, that variation, to work your lower back, hips, and glutes. Still lay on the ground, take the dumbbell off, put your feet on the sliders, do this variation, to work your hamstrings. Same exercise, but we've changed it up depending upon where we want to focus the most and what you want to work the most. So any questions on leg curls? Okay, now we're going to get into a couple bigger ones. So this is going to be the most controversial. Deadlifts. So deadlifts can be and are one of the single best exercises you will ever do. If you do them wrong, they can be one of the single worst ones you will ever do. So there's variations to a deadlift. The top one is a traditional deadlift. So she's using a kettlebell. You don't have to use a kettlebell. You could use a dumbbell. You could use no weight at all. What I have a lot of people do is start with their hands on their thighs, no weights. Once again, the focus is stick the butt out, run the hands down the legs until your hands are just below your knees, then stand back up again. So you might be looking at this going, well, what's different than a squat? And that's the big issue, is this and a squat are very similar. You're leaned forward a little bit more in this exercise. And once you start adding weight, where you hold the weight changes the exercise. Holding the weight down towards the ground is going to focus this more on hamstrings, hips, and glutes, lower back. With a squat exercise, holding the weight up higher is going to put more of the load on your quads. So once again, little different form changes the exercise and what you're loading. Now, I've gone through, since working back with the military, I've gone through 7 physical therapists at 2 different bases. The physical therapists that I think in my mind are the best have always made people that come in with a back injury perform deadlifts before they leave physical therapy. And the protocol is, we want you to be able to deadlift 75% of your body weight before you leave physical therapy. If you can do that, I'm not worried about you. I'm not worried about your back. I'm not worried about you coming back with injuries. It tells me everything is so strong that you're good to go. And to give you an idea, how much do they recommend that most people are able to deadlift? At a minimum, your body weight. For athletes, 2 to 3 times your body weight is what we expect them to deadlift. This is your single biggest and heaviest lift. So the one below that, this is a variation. This is called a stiff-legged deadlift. Notice how her knees are not bent very much compared to the top picture. The top picture, your hips move a lot, or your knees move a lot more. The bottom picture, your hips move a lot more. The bottom picture is going to focus on even more hamstrings. Why the difference? If people have had knee problems, I give them the bottom one, the stiff-legged deadlift. It's less load on your knees. More load on your hamstrings and hips, less load on your knees. Neither one is wrong. You notice in the bottom one, she does not go down so that those weights are touching the ground. That would be too low. The lowest you go is your head close to your level of your hips. That's it. If you go lower than that, if your head is below your hips, all the load goes to your lower back now. You've taken the load off the hamstrings and glutes. You've put all the weight on your lower back. Usually when I start people with deadlifts, I will actually put something in front of them, like a bench, or stack up a weight or two, so that they don't go too low. They only start out going half range of motion, come back up. Notice how that back on both of them is straight. You don't curve that back. That back stays nice and straight. You're pivoting at the hips. As soon as you round that back, the load goes to your lower back. That's how injuries occur with deadlifting. So form is very important with this one. That third variation is what we call a single leg stiff-legged deadlift. Every athlete I work with builds up to single leg stiff-legged deadlifts. This is huge for balance and stability. But you don't get there until you can do both legs perfectly. So traditional or stiff-legged, does not matter which one you do. Pick one, pick whichever one works the best for you. If you've had knee problems, I usually recommend the stiff-legged deadlifts. Less load on your knees, you're not bending the knees as much. It's more on your hamstrings, hips, and glutes. The top one, if you don't have knee problems, is just fine. It's going to be similar to a squat, but a deadlift is literally lifting dead weight off the ground. That's why it's called a deadlift. You're meant to take a weight from the ground and pick it up, usually to about hip height, so that you can carry it. So deadlifts and squats, those are the two biggest exercises in here. We call those whole body lifts because if you're carrying weight with them, it's not just your legs that are working. It's not just your glutes. You're working your core, plus your upper body that's holding on to the weight also has to work. So you work a lot of muscles in one single exercise. A deadlift is probably an exercise you're going to work the most muscles at one time. That's why it should be your strongest lift. Keep in mind, you might be a bit more out of breath doing them because you're using a lot of muscles all at once. It requires a lot more blood, a lot more oxygen. Questions and concerns?
Is your goal the same on 2 and 3 as far as the 75% or the total body weight eventually working to that?
So on 2, yes. On 3, no. Keep in mind, because you're going single leg, you're not going to use nearly as much weight single leg as you will both legs. So I would cut the weight in less than half. So whatever weight you would use doing both legs, drop the weight to about 40% of that when you start single leg work. Because now it's not just less muscles working, because you're single leg, those muscles are going to work harder because they have to stabilize, they have to balance, they have to do a lot more that you're not getting using both legs at the same time. So especially single leg, make sure you've got something close to you to hold on to for balance. I'll have people do these next to a chair, next to a couch, next to something where they can come halfway down, stop and hold, balance themselves, come back up. So start easy on these. They're a great one, but that also means they're very challenging. That's why they're good. They're going to work a lot of muscles all at once. Other questions? No? Okay. We can always come back to anything you have questions on. So, a lunge. This is where a lot of people feel it in their knees. First of all, if you notice the top one, she's actually going backwards. This is what we call a reverse lunge. So from where she's standing, she's taking that leg and putting it far behind her before dropping down into a lunge. This is very important because once again, kind of like those squats, your knees are not going past the end of your toes, so it takes some load off of your knees. So a reverse lunge is a great way to start. Notice she's got something there to hold on to. So it's a good way to begin. Do not go too low on these. Start off maybe going halfway down. Don't go real low. Don't try to force these. The other thing is never touch your knee to the ground. So you'll see walking lunges and things like that. Some people will tap their kneecap on the ground, and some people will tell you that's the right form. No, it is not. You never tap that kneecap on the ground. I've worked with about a dozen airmen who have broken their kneecaps from using weight on lunges and tapping their kneecap on the ground. So let me give you an example. If I was to take a 10-pound bar and tap your kneecap 10 or 15 times, do you think that would hurt? Do you think it would cause a problem? Now, if you do that with your body weight, imagine what kind of damage you're doing to that knee. So you notice in the one below it, her knee is a foot off the ground. That's fine. There is no problem with that. Do you develop any huge strength difference touching the ground versus not touching the ground? No. So if it's not going to give you some great benefit, don't risk trying to force that knee to the ground. It's not going to help anything. In this respect, close is close enough. If you're within a foot of the ground, great, you're doing awesome. You don't have to be within an inch. So I would start with a reverse lunge. That's the top one. The bottom one is a forward lunge. So she's stepping forward, then stepping back. That is a lot more load on the knees. The third one is actually a side lunge. So she's lunging to one side, straight back up. This works the inner thighs really well. So it is a little different. It's going to load the sides of the knees a lot more. That's good and bad. It's good because, yes, it will help strengthen across the sides of the knees and ankles. It can be bad because you may be really weak there, and if you go too low, it can be uncomfortable. Nothing states you have to go all the way down in any of these leg exercises. If you can only go halfway down without pain, start there. If you have weakness, you might not be able to go full range of motion yet. As you get stronger, you'll be able to go lower without pain. That's where I start people. Start with half range of motion on most of these. If that's fine, not uncomfortable, slowly go a little bit lower. Do not go to the point of pain with any of them. So a reverse lunge is great. A lunge is a more advanced exercise. I start people doing squats and deadlifts, leg extensions, leg curls first. This would be one of the last exercises I would add in. It's great, it's functional, works a lot of musculature, works on your balance. If you don't have a good base of strength, this can be too much. So this would be one of the last exercises I would have you do. If you can do everything else, great. Give this one a shot. If the other ones are not easy, do not try this yet. Questions on lunges?
In number 3, that looks very similar to some that I've seen where they call it an abductor squat.
Yes, so it's going to work inner thighs. So inner thigh, outer thigh are abductors and adductors. So yeah, you're working all the same things. The big difference here is you notice how her feet are parallel. They don't really angle out much. That actually is very important. If you really angle one foot out, it actually changes the exercise. So with this one, you're really going to feel it, that leg that's straight inside that knee on the bottom. If you're tight, you're really going to feel it there. It will be tight. That might keep you from going too low. It will also help strengthen there too. So it's going to work inner thigh, outer thigh, which is great, but only as low as what you are comfortable and your range of motion and strength allow.
Are these, well, particularly number 3, is that sometimes similar again to plie squats?
Yes. So you can do this. You notice she's starting with her feet wide and then just going side to side. You can start with your feet together, step out, then going into the lunge, come back up and step together. So it's all variations basically of a side lunge.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on lunges? Okay, calf raises. So calf raises are great. You notice first one, she's starting with a chair. You notice no shoes on in that one. It's really going to be up to you. The no shoes is going to be more challenging in the respect of you might not have range of motion, you might not have support across the feet. If you can do no shoes, great. If you cannot, put shoes on and do it. So coming up higher is going to be more challenging. It's also going to work your balance and your ankles a bit more. Start low. You may only get your heels an inch or two off the ground to start. That's okay. So I wanted to put that one in because starting with shoes with a chair for balance, you might try without shoes to see how much it changes things. It's going to be a little bit more challenging. It's going to work the bottom of your feet more if you do this without shoes. The third one, this is off a step. You notice he's letting his heels drop down to stretch out the calves a little bit. Then he's coming up. So what that's doing is just increasing the range of motion. So that would be a later one. You need to be able to do it off the ground first. Then we would go to a larger range of motion. But usually I think we have these with calf raises with a chair for balance. Do I have people do them without a chair? If you can safely, sure, but start with a chair. Focus on getting your range of motion and your strength to get your heels up as high as you can off the ground. Then we would look at going to the third one, greater range of motion, letting the heels drop down. You may feel your calves stretch out a little bit, then come up for range of motion. So calf raises are great. This is your balance. This is your Achilles tendon. This is strength across the back of your knee and strength across your ankles. So any questions on this one?
I have two questions, Dale. The first one is, for people who have neuropathy, are you aware of any research that says doing this helps to rebuild or repair nerves?
So good question. Yes, any exercise can potentially help rebuild the nerves. So we've seen with injuries, so I run the physical side of the Wounded Warrior program on base. People that have nerve damage, yes, it can be rebuilt. The reason you hear the hesitation in my voice, it is a very slow process. So I had one of our gentlemen on base was shot, and the bullet actually went in the bicep, came up through his shoulder, and at the middle of his chest, the bullet broke apart. One went under the clavicle, one went above, or under the breastplate, one went above. Obviously, a lot of nerve damage in the arm. It took a good 1.5 to 2 years to rebuild a lot of that. So he could still use the arm. And I actually got him doing push-ups within 2 months. But the nerve damage and some of that motor control, it took a good 1.5, 2 years to rebuild. It can be done, but it's slow. So it is good to do it. It can help keep the musculature active. That's one of the other issues a lot of times with neuropathy is if you don't feel anything there or the nerves are damaged, you may not realize that there's a problem there. Especially if you're talking neuropathy mixed with type 2 diabetes, that's a big problem. We do want you working your feet and your calves a lot because that blood flow is huge. And it also is a good way to make sure there's not problems there that could turn into something bigger.
Excellent. Excuse me. The second question is, what is more important? Is it the number of repetitions that you make this movement or whether holding it for a sustained period of time?
Ooh, good question. It depends on your goals. It depends on what you're trying to do. So the number of repetitions is going to work on building more strength. The hold is going to work on building more muscle endurance. I want you to have both. So which way should you start? I have people start from strength, meaning if you cannot give me 2 or 3 sets of 10, that is where we start. 2 sets of 2 or 3 holding it for 4 or 5 seconds, that's not good enough. That's not going to get you stronger. Get stronger first, then work on holding them for longer. So I work from strength. So give me sets of 10 first, at least 2, ideally 3 sets of 10, just reps, meaning up, right back down again. Then work on 2 or 3 sets of 10 with holding each repetition for 2 or 3 seconds. That's going to give you strength and muscle endurance, not just one or just the other.
Thank you.
Any other questions on calf raises?
Dale,
Yes.
the third one, that was about the only thing I would ever do before I went like on a run, you know, like a 5K or a 10K or something. So I skipped everything else you did already. But I would just go find a curb and do that until it was time to go running, you know.
Well, there is something to that. Your calves play a huge role in your ability to run.
It seemed to help.
So believe it or not, sports medicine, we can actually test your ability to store and release energy in your Achilles tendon. And it's a predictor of how well you can run. So calf raises like that specifically tie into that Achilles tendon, and stretching them out a little bit and then coming back up, make sure that Achilles tendon is good and pliable. Usually that Achilles tendon, you see people when they run, they have this spring in their step. That is the free rebound energy from the Achilles tendon and from the calf. So there's actually something to doing that before you run. It can help warm everything up, make sure they're nice and pliable to give you some of that free energy to help you run faster and better. So you were actually doing things right.
I needed all the help I could get, so that would be a good thing to start with.
Okay, last one, side steps. So the side lunge was great. If you cannot do side lunge, or if side lunge is a bit too much, start with side steps. So you notice the first one, she's literally staying in place, literally just stepping the leg out, bringing it back, stepping the leg out, bringing it back. It's going to work all the same muscles, but because we're not dipping as low, you're not loading them as heavy. The one underneath it is literally side stepping. You're literally walking sideways, usually for 5 to 10 steps. So take a wide step, bring the feet together. Take a wide step, bring the feet together. So you're moving in one direction. Of course, you need to come back, so you're working both sides equally. The third one, the band provides a little bit of resistance. So you'll see a lot of people using bands and everything else. Two things on this one. I will usually start people with the band slightly above their knees. And it seems like a funky little change. If you have the band down by your ankles, it actually puts more load on your knees. Starting with it just above the knees does not put any extra load on the knees. It only puts the load on your hips and glutes and hamstrings. So I will have people start doing this, but put the band just above the knees. If your knees are strong enough, then we can put it down towards the ankles. I'm picky about little things like this. So it just helps make sure that sometimes you'll do an exercise and little fine points like this can be the difference between the exercise feeling okay and you making progress, or it hurts for some reason. So a band can be great resistance. Keep in mind, there's different bands. There's usually about 4 different thicknesses or colors of bands. Start with the lighter one. Don't go with the heavy one. It can be way too much. Start with a light band, usually above the knees. Try that. If you can do that a couple times, no big deal. Then you can drop it down to just around the ankles to try it. So side stepping is a great one. This and the side lunges are the only two they're going to be working you laterally side to side. Most other leg exercises work in what we call a frontal plane, a single plane of motion, which is great, but it does not strengthen your muscles side to side. Unless you're doing some exercise that makes you go side to side, you're not strengthening those muscles. That's why I have these in here. That's why I have the side lunges in here. We don't just walk front to back. You have to sidestep. You have to be able to move around people. So this is going to work on your balance, your strength, and your agility to move sideways. Even if you're just doing the first or the second one with no bands, no weights, no nothing, it will still work on your strength and your agility and your balance. So they're all great exercises to incorporate. Like I said, the big exercises, your squats and deadlifts, those are going to be big exercises. They're going to work a lot of musculature all at once. These are going to be smaller ones, but they are very important overall as well. Questions on side steps? Okay, so big takeaways. Legs combined with core, that's actually your most important musculature for movement, for balance, for stability. So there's a reason why we tell people don't skip leg day. We always joke around with, you know, we see guys in the gym where they only do upper body, they never do legs. Your legs are very important. That's 50% of your muscle. That's 50% of your metabolism. Once you lose that musculature, you lose a lot of your ability to move on your own, to move, to walk, to run, to balance, to stand on one leg. It increases your risk of falls, of lower back injuries. It increases your risk of a knee or hip replacement. So really make sure that you're working your legs. One of the big things, I think I mentioned this 6 months ago when we started these, one of the big reasons to do strength training. They've done studies where they've gone into nursing homes, taken 80 and 90-year-olds and put them on hardcore strength training programs, squats, deadlifts, and with weight. They retested their strength every week and added weight every week. All of them got stronger. They didn't necessarily get big, but everybody got stronger. At the end of the study, 50% of the people moved out of the nursing homes. Why? Because the only reason why they were there, they lost the strength to take care of activities of daily living, to be able to drive themselves, walk around, go get things, do things. So that leg musculature is very important. Make sure you're working it 3 times a week. Make sure your form, you do not add weight unless your form is correct. Focus on your form first. Believe it or not, there is actually a reason why we have mirrors in gyms. It's not just so people can check themselves out and see how cool they look. It's to make sure your form is correct. So if you're not sure on some of these, do it in front of a mirror. Put a chair in front of a mirror and watch yourself do squats. Do they look right? Put it to the side so you can watch yourself from the side. Are you sticking your butt out first, going towards that chair? Are your knees going past the end of your toes? What's happening? Are you rounding your back? Watch your form. Once these are easy with proper form, then add a little bit of weight. You don't have to go crazy. Add 5 or 10 pounds. It's going to change what you feel. It's going to get you stronger. So make sure you're doing legs. Questions, concerns?
Another great program, Dale. A lot of information here to pack away, but I sure appreciate everything you've done.
Well, thank you. I wanted to change this one up a little bit and use the visuals so that you could see the exercises and we could discuss form a little bit more instead of just having a bunch of things written out. Like I said, form is the biggest issue when it comes to lower body. It's going to make sure that you get the most out of the exercise. It's going to make sure you're working all the right muscles, and it's going to make sure you don't put too much load on your joints. So form, form, form. That is the most important thing here. Any other questions? Don't tell me I answered everything.
Well, you got them all right.
Okay.
I don't have any more. Thank you, Dale.
So at this point, this is the last one in this series.
Oh.
Well, here's the catch.
What?
I want to hear from you about what you want to hear more about. With this whole series, this has mostly been me putting out important things that I thought you needed to hear.
Mhm.
I want to hear what you want to learn about or feel you need to learn about that maybe I haven't covered or maybe I've missed something. So I'm fine with doing more of these, but I want to make sure I'm hitting the mark by putting out information that's important to you.
That's the first time you've given us homework, according to my records,
It is. It is, other than to exercise.
other than exercising.
So what I would say is take a couple days, think of what topics are interesting or important to you. And Dave, I mean, you could even put it out there. I'm open to get input on topics that are of interest to people moving forward.
We will. We'll put it out on Facebook as well and do a lot of thinking ourselves, I'm sure.
Good. Yeah, because like I said, we've covered a lot, but I know there's a lot more. I try to be pretty well-rounded and stuff, but like I said, if I've missed something that you think about, or, you know, maybe I covered it a little too broadly and you want more specifics on it or more in depth, please mention it. Happy to go through things, happy to dive deeper into topics or make sure I'm not missing points that are important to you.
I can't let it pass. I do have one more question.
Sure.
You say to go ahead and give a day of rest in between the days that we go ahead and do the exercises you've given us. I usually have been doing some stretching on those other days, but
Perfect.
let's completely stay away from everything.
So stretching is great. Stretching, foam rolling, going out and walking is great. The big thing, if you're doing mostly body weight, could you probably do 2 days back to back? Yes, you could. But as I tell a lot of my students, it depends. So if you are getting good nutrition, then your body is more apt to recover quickly so you won't be as sore the next day. If you're stretching out, your body is much more likely to recover so you won't be as sore the next day. The more you exercise, your body gets used to recovering and will probably recover quicker. But in order to see changes, you have to challenge the muscles. You have to force them to do a little bit more than what they're used to doing. And usually where we see the challenges, most people do not give their body enough recovery. All the exercises I've given you, you do not get stronger when you're actually doing the exercise. You get stronger when your body recovers from you doing the exercise. So if there is no recovery, there is no getting stronger. So what we found is that recovery is just as important as the exercise. I don't want you necessarily doing nothing. We call it active recovery. I want you doing something, but maybe not these exercises again. So you could do upper body one day, lower body another day. You could do your cardio on days you don't do your legs. You could foam roll, you could stretch, you could go for a walk. Anything that's still getting your heart pumping, blood flowing, all those are great, but it's not loading the muscles so much that they cannot recover so that you're ready to do it again the following day.
Very good, sir. Thank you.
Very good. Okay.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and call it here. Like I said, please think about your questions. Think about topics you're interested in. I would really love to hear what else you're interested in and what else we can talk about.
Yeah, perfect then. Perfect.
Good, Dale. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, Dave, I'm going to end this here and I will send you the link as soon as I get this, probably tomorrow or the next day.
Sounds good, Dale. Great program. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye now.